Let's talk to former MEP and current Reform UK advisor, Alex Phillips. Good afternoon, Alex.
Hi, Kev.
Now, the BBC, their business editor, gleefully, his name is Simon Jack, reported soon after Nigel had reported his concerns that he was being closed down for political reasons. Simon Jack popped up saying, ha, no, you're not. No, it's not that at all. It's because you have to have £1 million to be an account holder at Coutts, and he's just not rich enough. That's why they're closing it down. We're the state broadcaster. That's true. Turns out it's utterly not true. He was closed down because his views do not align with the bank's purpose and value. So another bit of stultifying, stupefying corporate virtue signalling, and a man's life is being spoiled here. But to this entire syndrome, now that we know accounts are being closed down by at least one bank specifically for political reasons, this is sinister and extremely worrying.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It is, isn't it? And, you know, on the topic of that shoddy journalism, did they not stop to think that it's completely private, the amount of money that a private individual has in their bank account, and the bank shouldn't be disclosing that, let alone a state broadcaster or journalist who knows his salt? But, you know, what we're seeing now, and you're right, this is spreading across the corporate world, isn't it? This sort of censorship, this dislike and disgust for certain individuals. And banks, of all people, banks. I mean, Coutts are owned by NatWest, who is still 36% owned by the British taxpayer, because they essentially were being extremely willful and extremely negligent with minding our money, so much so that we had to bail them out from you know, essentially our government's coffers. And now they have the audacity to turn around and say they dislike a certain political individual. And what I find quite surprising by all of this, actually, is Nigel isn't elected at the moment. He is a broadcaster like you, like I, so he's not doing anything that could imply fraud or laundering or high risk. And frankly, a lot of his policies that he has been the proponent of for many, many a year have set the tone and the narrative for what we're seeing happening in politics today and are widely aped, whether that be by the Conservative Party or indeed even the Labour Party. But of course, this comes under their favourite buzz phrase, doesn't it, of diversity and inclusion. So what, is it because Nigel Farage happens to be a white Englishman? I mean, why? I don't understand how any bank has the right to turn around and say, we're just going to prevent you having a bank account, despite you being a resident of this country, despite you earning money in this country, despite paying taxes in this country, despite being a law-abiding citizen, upholding your civic duty in this country. We're going to prevent you from being able to hold on to your own money. It is frankly horrifying.
It is, and when they say that Mr. Farage's views do not align with our purpose or values, I mean, what do they mean by purpose? Is their purpose to make sure that all their customers are left-wing or something? Because that doesn't make any sense at all. Now, Alex, today the Prime Minister has seen the stories in the Telegraph and the Mail. He's sort of retweeted the Telegraph's front page chronicling Nigel's predicament, and he's put, "This is wrong." OK, great. We agree with you, Prime Minister. What the hell are you going to do with it? Because this is a freedom of speech issue, and I don't think banks should have the right to close down anyone for any reason apart from financial. And if they must close down people's accounts, they must be compulsorily forced to tell the customers why they're doing it, because I believe I'm right in saying that Nigel, along with other people who have suffered this fate, do not get any explanation from the banks because they don't have to tell you. This is all nonsense. So, Prime Minister, what is the Prime Minister's got to act on this, hasn't he?
Yeah, and, you know, the bank is basically over 1/3 state-owned. So I don't think they have any right whatsoever to start coming up with their own social policy for a country and deciding who can and can't bank with them. So I think there needs to be some sort of government intervention, because this is the thin end of the wedge. And thankfully, for a lot of other people out there who don't have the same platform and voice as Nigel Farage, he has put his head above the parapet, spoken about what's happened to him, come clean about it, even though potentially that could have come with even more risk of then finding it very difficult to open a bank account with anybody, because once once one bank account's closed, it tends to have a sort of a knock-on effect, a domino effect, with things like your credit rating and lots of other banks saying, well, if they won't give you an account, why should we? And also the processing costs of setting up an account with a new customer. But thankfully, he has spoken out, and so there's a light being shone on this issue. But what I don't understand is with all of these various banks who may or may not be shutting accounts of ordinary citizens based upon something they may have said or a view that they have held, who else are their clients? Are they saying that they don't have Russian oligarchs on their books, or foreign dictators, or dodgy ministers in banana republics, or they're not sort of funding companies that are setting up in China or enabling bank accounts to be established for shell companies of foreign states who wish to do us harm? Because the last time I checked, the banking sector was hardly showering itself in moral rectitude.
Absolutely. And going back to the Prime Minister, as I say, quite rightly, he says this is wrong. When he says that, I mean, if only he was, I don't know, the Prime Minister, he might be able to do something about it. Oh, wait a minute. He is the Prime Minister. He's always doing this, Sunak. He said, this is wrong. This isn't right. And then he never does anything. He's got to act on this. Banks are overstepping the mark here. They're overstepping their remit, and they must not be allowed to close down people because they don't like what they think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He has to do something. And frankly, it's not just banking, is it? There's all sorts of industries and sectors in the commercial world out there who essentially treat ordinary Brits with utter disdain because they have some sort of ridiculous, newfangled, neoliberal, made-up-on-the-spot set of rules and regulations and prescriptions that apparently we must all live by. No one sends us a textbook explaining to us what we should be doing on any given day. And frankly, the vast majority of us don't agree with this sort of social diktat. But it's very, very scary. It's beginning to feel a lot like a Chinese social credit system where you can only get, access to certain services, where you can only start paying for things if you tick a load of boxes and are performing every day in a way that some sort of shadowy government suggests that you should be behaving. And I think anybody out there, whether you're on the left wing, the right wing, whether you voted Brexit, whether you voted Remain, it doesn't matter. This is the moral principle at stake here of a bank that you've been a customer of for many years, where you've kept your money, who has stored your private details, who in many respects, that is one of the greatest levels of trust you can have commercially. The people who protect your money has not only just willfully gone and shut someone's accounts down on completely illogical and quite spiteful reasons, but then saw fit to lie about it, and then saw fit, apparently, to disclose to mainstream media what may or may not be the contents of Nigel Farage's bank account. It's utterly disgraceful.
Totally agree. And I wonder whether or not Mr. Farage will get an apology for the state broadcaster for reporting his story wrongly. I would suggest, Alex, don't hold your breath.